Super stuff. Well, Rachel, thank you. This is long awaited and conversation that I know see a lot of people within the group have been itching to hear. Obviously, I sent some messages out to everybody recently to kind of touch on the topic of EU trade pay transparency, not trade pans. But for everybody that is listening into this, I'm having a conversation with Rachel Gibbs, who runs a consultancy company called Merities and is a wizard, or wizardess, or however you want to look at it, in the EU pay transparency world. So yeah, we've got a bunch of questions that have been put towards us. What we have done with those questions is collated them into a few categories so that we can kind of give a bit more of an overarching response to it. And then any that aren't answered or anything that's specifically left untouched, we'll probably loop back in with individuals that have extra questions, and obviously loop to the people that have asked questions as well, just in case there's extra things that Rachel can advise on. Rachel's background, so just in terms of companies and things like that, I know that many of the people in this community, quite a handful of them now, are either working with you or have and speak very highly. But companies like Recursion, Santera and Shire have all been part of Rachel's network for the last few years, and where she's had great resounding success in the work that she does. So thank you. Thanks for doing this as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me, Alex. It's great to be here. Thank you.
One of the first topics we thought we'd touch on, so it falls under the talent and job architecture foundations. The question around kind of work of equal value versus same work. How should organizations interpret work of equal value versus same work in practice?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's fundamental to the directive. I think everyone knows what same work is, which is two people doing the same job. That the confusion arises over work of equal value, and the only way to do that successfully is to value the jobs and use some form of gender neutral objective way of determining that the jobs are of equal value. And many of the big consultancies provide job evaluation methodologies, and that is a successful way in which that can be done. There are others, but those are probably the most robust ways. And in terms of discussions that you might have with workers' representatives, trade unions, European Work Council, for instance, most of them recognise these approaches, and they're agreed generally to be robust. Then once you've kind of got your same work and work of equal value, the next question is your job categorisation, and there are many ways of doing this, and I think there's a lot of discussions with the companies I work with and talk to about how to categorise the jobs so that you ideally have them grouped together according to work of equal value, same work, and that's really the crux of the directive, is moving to this job categorisation, because ideally you're looking for a range of less than 5%, except if there are, again, objective gender neutral reasons why pay is different. So getting that bottom foundational information correct, but across your employees, is absolutely crucial if you're to have a robust system that's defensible if you have to ever go to employment court.
Okay, but where are companies getting stuck on that?
I think two ways. One is about the understanding of it, and the second is concern about the employment costs that come with categorisation of worker, because you may, if you took the whole range, particularly in a large organisation, if you took the whole range across a job level, then it becomes incredibly expensive to compare all those categories, because I mean we know in HR alone that typically comp and ben specialists are paid a slight premium compared with other roles within HR, and so if you've only got a 5% range and you've already got more than that within a small function, relatively small function such as HR, and then you multiply that across the whole organisation, it's causing quite a lot of headaches and concerns. And to be honest, there isn't a single easy answer out of that. And companies have to make a decision about how they want to approach it.
Okay. And is there, I guess the misinterpretations, it sounds like, is just based on the lack of understanding?
Partly, and partly this fear of the unknown, I think, as well, because, you know, I've done comp and ben for a long time, and traditionally we've looked externally at the marketplace, we've benchmarked, and that's been very clear. You know, what are competitors paying? Can we match it? Yes, no. Can we afford this candidate? Yes, no. And now the question will flip. It'll be, what are we paying internally? What is the market paying us? And can we afford this candidate? And that's it takes a little while to get that kind of change process and change mentality going. And I think that's where we're at. We're not post implementation. We're not a few years on. So we're coming up to it, and people are, I wouldn't say resistance is the wrong word, but certainly kind of on a journey to, I don't even like that term really, but you know, we're getting there, but we haven't got there. So there's a change process in hand.
And are there sort of, with the work you do in that space, are there sort of simple applications of frameworks or things like that that make this a lot more easier and palatable? Because I appreciate it's ambiguous.
Yeah, there is support out there. There's the job evaluation methodologies I mentioned before. There's pay equity solutions, SaaS solutions, which can then help you look at the pay differences. If you're not comfortable doing, it is possible to do it in Excel depending on your employee numbers. If you've got large numbers, it's unrealistic. But you know, there are solutions out there to kind of move you along the process so that you can move to June's implementation date in a good situation, or at least understanding what's going on under the bonnet, as it were.
Got you. Right. Yeah, it seems almost, yeah, the topic itself is obviously it's a big shift, isn't it? And I think the fear in that sense is actually not kind of chipping away at the, you know, each section and understanding that step by step, but yeah, I know what it's like when you've got a massive project and you sit there and you're like, oh, where do I start? But no, thank you. We did get some questions as well about kind of impact of country approaches, so the kind of country level differences and implementation reality.
Yeah.
One of those was implementation timelines differing by country. So, for instance, the example of the Netherlands has been delayed. How should companies with kind of Dutch headquarters and small EU subsidiaries interpret that?
Specifically on the Netherlands, they shouldn't. They should follow the country rules. I think there's been a bit of a misconception. I certainly talk about the EU pay transparency, and I realised that not everybody understood it was a country by country basis. So Slovakia, we know, is going to implement from the 1st of June, and
Yep.
even if you have a Dutch headquarters, you will need to follow the Slovakian pay transparency implementation rules in Slovakia for those employees, and similarly in the Netherlands. So it's a country by country basis, which of course adds a huge layer of complexity for multi-country employers. But in a sense, it's no different to payrolling. You do that on a country basis. You follow the country tax and social security rules. You're happy to do it again for pay transparency, gender pay gap reporting, right to information, and the implementation deadlines.
So it's Slovakia first. Is there a pattern emerging?
Yeah. So Malta actually went first in August with two elements of the directive. One was around candidate rights to know the pay ranges before negotiations commence, and the other was the right to information around where my pay level is. I've not seen any feedback yet from Malta about how that's gone. Next comes Poland on Christmas Eve, and they will be implementing candidate rights to know the pay ranges before negotiations. And then I think it's Sweden and Slovakia on the 1st of June, 26th. And then I think at the moment, I think all the rest are going on the 7th of June. So, and
Wow.
and like Poland and Malta, there's not complete implementation in every country. It's a bit of a hodgepodge at the moment. It will work itself out, but we're not there yet.
So it's going to be kind of almost like a two-step process for some countries where they do some stuff first, and then by that latter date where the rest of Europe follows, is the idea that they would then almost be up to speed by that point for the other bits.
Yeah. And what we've heard with the Netherlands, for instance, there's been a letter written by the chief negotiators for the Parliament on the directive, encouraging Netherlands to fall in line with the rest of the directive. And we know from other examples that in the past the Parliament had, or maybe it's the Commission, have to forgive me, have fined countries for late implementation. And what they've said is that normally there are 2 years to implement directives, but they gave 3 years. And this, I mean, we've had quite a tumultuous past few years, and lots of political change in Europe, and that's kind of added a layer of complexity, which is why everything, I think, is a bit later than might be expected or hopeful.
Makes sense. You mentioned obviously the part of that, which is the candidate experience, and actually that was one of the topics that came up in questions as well, which was recruitment and candidate experience. And actually it was to do with salary ranges and job ads, which I particularly think is is a very interesting one. I'm interested in your opinion on this, and I'm happy to certainly jump in with an opinion as well. But are organisations beginning to include salary ranges in job ads, and and what impact is that having on candidate experience from what you're seeing and hearing?
Yeah, so I think it depends at the moment. The experience is it depends on the seniority of the role and the sector that the role falls in. So manufacturing type roles have always been fairly transparent, and cleaning, basic entry level, no disrespect to people who do the roles, but in terms of the role size, it's generally considered quite low. Those have always been quite transparent, but then as you move up, and when there's unions involved in negotiation, as you move up seniority, the transparency tends to tail off. And there are some sectors such as banking particularly, and medicine, medical affairs, where pay transparency is pretty poor. These will all need to come up by the time the directive comes in. So I don't know, what have you seen?
It's not consistent, I must admit. I mean, if you see kind of what the companies are doing, I wouldn't necessarily say that more than 50-60%, probably 50%, are fairly clear with it. I think that's and it does differ. I think the companies that are the bigger companies, where they are very standardized in terms of HR processes, comps and bends, and that sort of thing. It's crystal clear, and it's really beneficial to understand kind of the low, the mid, and the high points of salary ranges. I think it's in biotech where it's a little bit harder, because obviously where those smaller businesses they don't have processes set out, and I think then it's kind of concerning with internal equity, and they don't really even have ranges. It's kind of just looking at what others have in the business at a similar level, as we were saying earlier. So it's less clear, and I think companies in that world are also a little bit reluctant to be coming forward with figures that may, in their world, I think the concern is probably because of cash and because of funding and financing. And I think sometimes that to be really cut and dry with a salary range, I think it opens a kettle of fish in some conversations. Saying that, and I know we touched on this the other day, but the candidate experience part, I think where these, and you shared with me something I didn't actually know, which was in the directive, it's not actually essential to have to share the top end of the range, which I think is super important, because I think for companies looking at this, the concern is obviously that, by sharing a range, most candidates in the market will then start to attribute their motivations towards the top end of the range, irrespective of where they sit in that range. And it can cause mayhem when it comes to recruitment processes. So as we said the other day, I think the fortunate side is to be able to manage expectations with people that are applying for positions based on anywhere between sort of the bottom end of the salary and up to, we work to midpoint, but typically it would be to kind of 60% of the full range. And obviously the advisory on that is purely on the basis that, we need to have ability, one, to be able to move people forward within the level. So after 12 months, they do a great job. There's still incentive parts to that person's experience once they're into the business. I think that's an important part. But then obviously too, it comes back to when people looking to move jobs, they typically want to try and increase their salaries by the move. And naturally that also can create wild expectations where people start requesting 20-30% increases on their basic salaries, and it's just astronomical. So yeah, having those finite details really helps from the process perspective and the candidate's expectations as well, where working to that at the front end, I've seen it happen, when I first started in recruiting. Not having the ranges created massive ambiguity, wild expectations, and a really low percentage acceptance in terms of when companies were offering candidates, because it was so poorly communicated. But now where we've got that clarity and we can really kind of be focused on that part at the front end, I mean, as providers, it should be 99% acceptance rates, provided the fact that everything's been done correctly, due diligence is done correctly. So yeah, it's not there yet for sure, but it definitely is an important part of the experience, should we say.
That's true. And one of my clients put in ranges, and they were interesting because they paid really well for the lower evaluated roles. And when they went out to market with the ranges on the job adverts, the quality of candidates they saw came through was exceptionally high. They were a little company, no one had ever heard of them, in a dusty corner somewhere, and yet suddenly they were attracting really top caliber candidates, and their speed of recruitment was so much quicker because people came pre-prepared. There was a discussion around salary, but there wasn't this kind of cliff waiting for the moment. It was much more adult, actually, adult to adult, which is nice.
Definitely, you do see that for sure. One of the things that for people moving businesses as well, there are different pay grades. You think of the different businesses out there. We spoke about this the other day. There are companies that are miles off the market averages, and naturally when those individuals that are probably actually being a little bit undervalued in what they do, based on the way that they're being remunerated, and then there's another position, same sort of thing, but paying 10-20% more, it does start to quite make those individuals question, am I being valued in my current organization? So it will create turbulence, it will create some movement. I guess the fundamental part as well is just to sense check within that to make sure that people aren't just moving for money, because then you start to run into issues with cultural alignments and all these sorts of things. So there's a lot of very kind of minor aspects to be really close to it, but again, it's good that it's driving at least an uptick in terms of recruitment processes and obviously the caliber of individuals as well. I'm just looking at the other questions. So HR process is effective. This is an interesting one. HR process is impacted by the EU pay transparency. Which HR processes are going to be directly affected by the directive?
So I've done a bit of analysis on this, and I'm looking for the department that isn't affected. So
Okay.
if I go through my mental list, the main one obviously is reward. I think that's clear. Talent acquisition, we've just touched on in some depth. They will be impacted. They'll no longer be able to, and they'll have to work with recruitment managers to make sure the question about existing salaries isn't asked, because there's now a right to privacy around existing salaries. I think the main one that most people are missing or not focusing on is employee relations, however that's dealt with in organisations. But there's going to be a central role for the workers' representatives in the directive, both to as an advocate for the employee, but more particularly to sort of oversee pay equity within the organisation based on the directive. And that relationship is really key. And having that strong relationship with your workers' reps through the employee relations teams is going to be really important. Talent development is another one. This is where one part of the directive asks you to share pay processes where there is damn, the word's gone from my mind, I forget it. Pay progression. So where you have pay progression, obviously that fits into recruitment and talent development. That will be one element, and potentially training of line managers, education of employees, and education of workers reps. That might fall into talent development. There's a big piece around HRIS teams getting the data right for reporting. And the final one is around data privacy and whatever is shared both within the reports that are produced, but also what's shared with the workers' reps needs to be compliant and respects people's privacies as it's interpreted at each country level. So yeah, I couldn't find anyone that wasn't affected, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing.
Across the board then?
Yeah, pretty much. To a greater or lesser extent, but no team seems to be coming out of the directive unscathed. They've all got some work to do, unfortunately.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, you just can overlook those types of things, can't you? It's interesting when you say about talent development, actually, and the leadership development part. What do you mean by that?
And there's a big piece to make sure that, I was talking about this in the week, making sure, well, let me start again. So not training, but equipping line managers to have comfortable pay conversations where people, well, the worst thing that can happen with the outcome from the directive is that people look at their pay and they're unhappy and they have concerns. They feel they're being mistreated. They feel they're being paid inequitably, and it leads to a frustration and a lack of trust in the organisation. And ideally, line managers should be able to support employees with those conversations. Equipping them is not easy, and part of that is also getting them to a point where they understand that pay means different things to different people. And what I mean by that is, it's very normal in a relationship that a couple fall out over money wherever, and part of that is because I come with certain attitudes and expectations around money, and my other half in my example has different expectations as well, and they don't necessarily line up. And that's just a sort of one-on-one example. And then when you're a line manager and you've got several employees, and particularly when you as a line manager are earning more than them and you have more choices with your earnings compared with the people who are junior to you, you cannot assume that everybody sees money the same way, or salaries or pay or net pay. So yeah, it's something I'm still thinking about, but I think it's a really important point to train people on, and line managers particularly, to equip them to have those conversations, because they are that first line of defence. Because the last thing you want is either a grievance to be raised or or them to go to lawyers. That's really the output you want to avoid.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you say that as well, because actually, we held one of the group calls on Wednesday this week, and that was based on kind of purpose, culture and leadership and transformation. We didn't really get too in detail into the leadership part. We kind of ran out of time, but one of the things I really see at the moment, and I'd read out a stat in the week about the underpreparedness of managers across the business for transformation and handling transformation. This is a transformation in its purest of forms. And I think the stat was something like 37% of managers feel that or HR feel that 37% of their managers are actually prepared for these sorts of things. Another massive theme I'm seeing from conversations from everyone at the moment is also how I said that L&D was probably in font 10, up until recent, but actually it's now in huge bold letters where companies are really kind of having to think and get creative with their L&D capabilities and how they're really focusing in on that. And I hadn't even thought actually about equipping managers for these types of conversations, let alone everything else that's coming into the fold. Because you're right, the fundamental part of why people typically go to work, obviously one of those core reasons is what they get paid and being paid to sustain a life. But actually, when you've got differences in a business, then you've got obviously like a poor communicator that's got to deal with that. You do run the risk of some really challenging moments, and obviously as HR, it's being forward thinking enough to actually isolate who may those people be, mapping them, and perhaps kind of going into really making sure that you're trying to de-risk in that sense.
I think that's true, and I think and most everyone in HR is aware of this. It is that fact that pay is personal, and it's fundamental. It's a hygiene factor. So once you've got your pay at a level you're comfortable, extra pay is nice, but it doesn't move your needle forward in terms of your motivation. But when it drops below that level because trust has been impacted, it's a big impact on the bottom line.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you couldn't be more right, I think. Wow, no, really good point actually. Final questions here then. So the EU, what did we have? HR processes implemented by pay transparency. We did have, so much of the time as well, the practical advice and recommendations I think we wanted to look at, because I think I wanted to kind of make sure that we're bringing together some examples and things. So based on the clients you've supported, what are the top practical steps organizations should take in the next 6 to 12 months? It's probably not 12 months because we've not got that much amount of time.
Well, actually, that is a practical step. So I'll come back to the practical steps at the moment, but one of the ones, given that time is getting quite short, is to build a good relationship with your workers' representative. And if you can find either most countries are saying either trade union or work council members, you're looking for someone ideally who's pragmatic, who recognises that this isn't a magic wand moment. There is limited money, and you may not be able to solve everything in one go. This is something that can help. If you could build a good relationship with the workers' reps, you can really help the business kind of smooth this transition forward. That would be the biggest tip, perhaps. The process is around doing your job leveling, getting your job categories sorted, looking at the pay equity, ensuring that your pay is within the ranges, and if it's not, what remediation you need to take to achieve it. And then it's about communication, which we've touched on now, across employees, HR, line managers, and workers' reps and leadership. But kind of making sure that everyone is aware of what's coming and the impact, and this fact that you may not have been able to solve it up front, and it's a journey, as they say. So yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Well, I know that's not for all the questions that we did receive. I know that there were a whole bank of them, but obviously try and fit this into as close to 30 minutes as we wanted to do so, just so that we could get something for everyone. As I said at the beginning, Rachel's obviously been working heavily in this industry sector and really closely with many of the businesses that sit within it. So if there's stuff in there that you're thinking about, you do need extra support, you do want to kind of explore some of these channels, then in the follow-up to this, obviously I'll post the video into the group, share that via email, but also we'll make sure that all of Rachel's communication, contact details, everything is there so that you can get in touch, explore things with her, and see which additional ways that maybe she may be able to help. What we are going to look at doing is also just pulling together some practical bits and pieces for you as well. So we'll send around something on top of what this conversation brings. But please do comment, like, share, question, anything, and then obviously share with individuals within your networks as well. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Thank you, Alex.